Welcome back, trainers, to the Pokemon tier list, where we are ranking every single Pokemon up to Calyrex from worst to best. Now, this is the third part in an 8-part series, so if you haven't seen the first 2 parts, I suggest you go back and check those out. There are some spicy takes in there, that's for sure. Now, with a list this massive, there's a lot of factors to take into consideration when putting it together, such as rules, formatting, and just other things to mention. Well, everything you need to know is quickly being shown on the screen now and will also be in the description below. If you want a further explanation for each of these, that'll be in the beginning of the first video. Now, it's been a long time since the second part of this series was shown in the awful tier, so while I'll talk about that more at the end of the video, I just want to say for now, if you're still continuing on with this series, thank you so much for your continued support. Now, a big reason for why this video took so long to come out is because in comparison to the awful tier, this list is more than triple the size. So, I know I've said in the past, get yourself a snack, but you might want to get yourself a meal for this one. Sit back, relax. Here is the bad tier. Enjoy. Starting off our bad tier, hailing from the Johto region, we have Snubbull. Now, I was surprised to have Snubbull opening up the bad tier because I originally thought it would end up in the awful tier, but I couldn't find myself to put it in there. My main reason for its awful tier anticipation was because it's got a bit of an ugly face, and it mentions that in all the Pokedex entries, and I don't want to pick on the Pokemon, but it's not very appealing. The main issue I have with this Pokemon is mainly the confusing design choice of its fur. It's hard to tell whether it's wearing a dress or its body is shaped like a dress, and in reality it's supposed to be shaped like a dress. I feel that's a little confusing, because having the fur shaped like a dress just makes the body type look odd. It just looks like a bad haircut to have the much longer fur be at its feet, where it just looks normally shaped around the top. I think Snubbull would have looked much better if they went all in on it wearing a dress and just gave it a real dress. Up next is a Pokemon I feel like is the true stepping stone into the Pokemon that are just really poorly designed, and ones that are just not as good as others. Ditto is that perfect middle point. All of Ditto's charm comes from its personality, which is great because, you know, there's more to like about a Pokemon. But as for its design, which is what we're ranking here, it's just a little blob. And while I said the origin of a Pokemon's design isn't going to be a factor in this list, it's what's done with that design. There are other sludge Pokemon that put a lot more detail into their sludge-like nature. While Ditto doesn't have a lot of design in its sludge, it's very much just a smooth little jelly, and the only other detail on it, its face, is just a line and 2 dots, and a very simple one at that, which works when it's transformed, but not as its own design. I feel like Hitmontop is a Pokemon when first said that it's a bad design, you would just think it's crazy talk. Like, Hitmontop is so cool, look at its spin. When it stands upright and it looks like a normal Pokemon, it's not very impressive, since everything in Hitmontop's design looks like it serves a function rather than being natural. Its tail and its feet and its arms all have little balls at the end connected to a very thin arm or leg, made to look like it's balancing out its spinning top. There's not a lot of detail when it does stand up, the singlet looks like it's just painted on, and nothing in its body looks like it's meshing well into each other. It's just a bunch of solid colors on solid colors. The head isn't super detailed either, it's just all brown with a couple lines separating its hair or detailing its face. There's nothing in its design besides the head shape that really stands out. You know, they say Regidrago has the powers of every dragon Pokemon, but it looks like it only copied Charizard. Ooh! No, I'm just playing around. You could tell they kind of wanted to change up the head, looking a little too similar to Charizard. They changed the eyes and nose up a little bit, but it really does just look like Charizard's head. This Pokemon is also just a little messy. I don't like how this Pokemon revolves so much around the head that uses it to stand up. There's the teeth marks around its body, and the feet kind of just stick out. The one saving grace of Regidrago is that when it goes to attack, the dragon head turns around and the body is used as the source of the beam coming out of the dots on its face. It looks really good when it's in that pose, although the feet sort of stick out when it's in that state and doesn't even look like a tongue or anything. But besides that pose, it's a pretty messy design actually. Dude, I'm just gonna tell you straight up, it's the eyes and the mouth. They look so much scarier than they need to be. I actually really like the little mushrooms on the back of Paris. Paris is already a very small Pokemon, so having those two little mushrooms on it, which are different in color to the rest of its body, so they stand out pretty well. But just those eyes, man, they pierce into you, and then like you get to those teeth and it's like a pincer mouth. It's like, whoa, what are we doing on this Pokemon? It's a Pokemon that I feel like should be pretty cute, but the eyes and the teeth, they're just freaky. Igglybuff and Ambipom must have gone to the same barber because once again we have two different haircuts and I don't get it. It has the tufts on its head, and then I thought for the longest time that the little swirl on Igglybuff's head was supposed to be like a psychic type symbol, even though it's not a psychic type. But it's just, no, I guess that's supposed to be the little swirl on its hair that Jigglypuff will have, like a more simple version. But it's a line, it doesn't look like hair at all. Jigglypuff is already a very simple design, and when you try to make a design that's even simpler than Jigglypuff, it's hard to pull off. And the two defining features of it, it's two different hairstyles where one of them doesn't even look like hair. It brings the whole design down. I'm gonna be honest with you, I have no idea how it happened, but when I was revising this list, Tangela was like tiers higher, and it was like, whoa, let's move this one down a little bit, because it is just a vine. It's a big vine ball, a big tumbleweed. I really like the mystery, and if I could applaud Tangela for anything, I like that its red boots sink into its vines instead of just like being placed underneath it. So it adds to that mystery a little bit. But besides that, yeah, there's nothing more. I'll get the positive things out of the way. Sewaddle's leaf collar is really cool. I think because it's made out of leaves and its body looks like it's wrapped in leaves, it creates like a fashionable style of a leaf that you don't see much in other Pokemon. So why is it so high in the list? Well, it's the face. I think the little teeth sticking out of like an upside down U-shaped mouth and the two little tufts of fur, I guess, on its head are really dopey looking. It's really dopey looking. Maybe if the eyes were a little bigger, because the eyes are small, so you're gonna focus on all of the other parts of its face, and the other parts are so silly looking. Alright, I think we all like to pick on this Pokemon. I remember making this list too. I'm like, oh, Dunsparce is pretty good. It's just picked on because it doesn't evolve. But like, oh, its design isn't that good either. So Dunsparce is already based off of a very obscure animal in the Tsuchinoko. Yes, I did that in one take. Do not ask questions. Which already has a very odd body type. But in the Pokemon games, they added a stinger and some wings, which is an odd choice because the body is already so big and the wings are so small, so it's already going to be awkward looking. I think the tail is actually a nice addition, and I think the yellow and the light blue go really well together. But it's just all of those combinations of the odd body shape, the small wings, and something I don't see many people complain about, but it irks me, that the two little stingers on its mouth are on its bottom lip. So when Dunsparce opens its mouth, it just looks like it has a little beard, and it's just, ugh, I don't need that. Someone's gonna look at this video, I know it, and say, oh, an apple made it higher than Samurott, this is blasphemy. Applin isn't just another Execute or Klefki where it's just a thing. There's so much effort put into this little apple that it's like, you gotta recognize it. It's not just an apple, it's the worm in the apple, and the worm does so much lifting within the apple that it's pretty neat. The little eyes make up the leaves on the apple. The worm body makes a stand for the apple to stand up and a reason that it could roll. And if it needs to attack, it takes its little head out of the apple and shoots. So it's not the craziest thing ever, and on the surface, yes, it is still just an apple with a worm in it. There's a lot done here to really push it further, and that has to be appreciated, even though it's still in the bad tier. But, you know, this could have been like one of the worst designs if it didn't have that worm in there. Bellsprout kind of works. I really like how the roots on its feet make up its little toes, and the leaves and the face all come together decently, but it's just, oh, it's so silly looking. I think maybe if Bellsprout's stem was maybe just a little thicker, it would make it look a little better. But as for its design, it just feels so like loose and weird and wacky. I think the lips on the edge of the flower are a pretty clever way to make it look like a little cannon, but it's nothing to really write home about, especially with its really tiny eyes, so you're really just focusing on its nozzle mouth. It's just a really odd combo with the really small eyes and the really thin stem, and then the really big flower and the really big leaves. It's a bit of a Shiinotic vibe, where these really like long pieces combined with a more unsettling face or body structure. Alright, so here I think people are gonna start getting a little mad. Yes, I don't think Sudowoodo is a very good design. The little green spheres on its hands, which I'm assuming are supposed to be rocks as well, I feel like they shouldn't have stopped there. It just feels weird that the rock structure on its head that looks like branches has nothing there. It feels like the only thing that really sticks out of Sudowoodo are its hands, and then when you get to its face, you just get a very simplistic smile and eyes. I feel like having more spheres on its head could have worked really well too. Sudowoodo really does look like a middle evolution. It looks like there could be so much more done with its design, and where it stands right now, it's a little awkward, to be honest. And I get it, it's supposed to be because it's a fake tree, but I feel like if you had a Pokemon that really went into looking like this big powerful tree, you could have still had that personality trait be on a much more intricately designed Pokemon. Alright, another tier, another fossil from Galar, with Dracozolt. So, my main complaint for the past two fossils on this list is that it just looks like it's in pain, and I don't want a Pokemon that lives a painful life. So, for this version, the little electric Pokemon looks happy at least. It looks like he's having fun there, with the dragon giving it very powerful legs. I'm sure it's very easy for it to run around. The only thing that puts it in the bad tier is that it just doesn't look that good. I still think the Galar fossils in general are gonna be a hit or miss design for everyone, and this one is like, you know, like at least the Pokemon's not in pain, but the electric type isn't big enough, so you see the insides of the Pokemon. It still doesn't go together well at all, but at least the Pokemon's happy this time. Up next, we begin our escapades into the Cocoon Pokemon, first up with Metapod. I know it's blasphemy to have the Pokemon that had the most intense anime battle this high up on the list, but Metapod doesn't have a lot going on. One thing I will appreciate about Metapod is something that's pretty important in Pokemon is that it's a very noticeable silhouette from whatever side you look at it from. Depending on which way you look at Metapod, it can either look like a crescent moon, it could look like it'll have a big nose, or it could look like it has a bunch of spikes coming out of it. What puts Metapod this low, though, is that it's very plain. It's a cocoon and it does its job well, but it's just a green cocoon, and the lines in it, the black lines, don't really pop out as much, so what you have here is just a green shape with some eyes on it. Which again, points for the silhouette, and I think this shade of green is very nice, but nothing really more than that. Ever since I was a kid, whenever I would think about each Pokemon's early game, Mammo or Rodent, whatever you want to call it, I would always rank Sentret pretty low, and I never really understood why, because when you look at Sentret, it has a pretty cool design. It has a very fluffy tail that it could stand on, which is very charming. A nice tan ring around its belly to separate itself from the much darker tone on it, and these little floppy ears that make sense with the floppy tail, and its little pudgy arms. So what's the issue? It's the face. Because of the very dark shade of brown used in Sentret's eyes, the very minimalist face with the 2 dots and the smile in black makes it get lost, and you really lose the face when looking at Sentret, especially if you look at it from a little further away. Similar to what I said from the beginning of the list with Cherrim, a Pokemon's design can be great, but if you lose that connection to a face, it could really hurt the design in the end because you don't have that attachment to it. You can appreciate what it has, but if it doesn't have the charm in it that you get with the face, the whole design unfortunately suffers because of it. Spewpa is a Pokemon I never really hear people speaking about. It's a Pokeball in Smash Brothers, so you think it would have some type of notoriety, but no one ever really speaks about Spewpa or the Vivillon line in general, and I wanted to really stick up for it, but after really looking into it, yeah, I can see why people don't really talk about it. What I thought I would love about Spewpa, and something that I think is its best feature, is the fur and bristles that come out of it. I love the white shading compared to its more darker head, and the coloration on the bristles is so nice and complementary to the white. But then you get up to the head and it's like, ugh, what's going on up here? I enjoy the bug eyes, and I think the little white glare in them goes well with the white fur, but oh man, all the little dots around its head, the lining that separates the 2 sides of the face, and the tan section on its head really push into that insect persona. Which, I mean, obviously it's an insect, but I just think it loses all of that charm. It becomes very detailed, which clashes a lot with the simpler fur on its body, and I think it hurts it. It's a little gross, honestly. Which is a shame, because I think for a Cocoon Pokemon, Spewpa is way more unique than other ones. Speaking of Cocoon Pokemon, yes, this is the last one we'll have for a little while, but Swadloon, I guess, would technically be a Cocoon Pokemon if you count Sewaddle as the caterpillar. And Swadloon, I can say, is just, like we've all had those days where we just want to huddle up on our blankets, we're sleep deprived, we don't want to be bothered at all, and I really love that concept as a cocoon. The issue for me is, it's very plain. There's no detailing at all in the grass. There's a couple lines around its head, and then you have the different colored leaves flopping out the side, which is a nice touch, but the 2 big leaves wrapping around it are just very bare. And then you have the face, which you would imagine would take more attention, but I don't know what they're going for with the face. It just looks like a big egg, where it's supposed to be in that caterpillar going in a cocoon phase. I don't think Swadloon really works as a pupitating caterpillar because you still see the rest of its body because the leaves don't completely cover up its body, which does work for the sense of it being wrapped around in theoretical blankets, because if you wrap up its whole thing, you kind of lose it a little bit. And you also lose its functionality as the leaves acting like arms. It just doesn't come together all that well. If there was more design in the leaves and maybe just a little more structure to the main body, Swadloon would have been a lot better. The concept and idea is fantastic, but the execution needed a lot more work. Ah yes, the famous duck with a leak beat out Sudowoodo. I could already hear it. Yeah, Farfetch'd isn't really anything to write home about, but there's nothing really wrong with it. It looks like a perfect first stage evolution, which is funny because this stage of Farfetch'd doesn't evolve. It's very bare bones, which is why it's so high up on the list. It's not too naturalistic. You'll still have like the more angry eyebrows, which I think work a lot better in its Galarian form because this doesn't look like an angry Pokemon. And the leak being around the same size as Farfetch'd, it's a creative way to give a Pokemon a weapon, and seeing the feathers wrap around it, flopping all around, is pretty adorable, I'm not gonna lie. I think Burmy does the bagworm concept much better than Wormadam. I think Wormadam has the advantage of having a wider body so you can put all of these decorations on it, because Burmy kind of just looks like an ornament as a bagworm. So if you have more stuff to decorate it with, it ends up making the Pokemon look a lot better. However, I think Wormadam still comes with some uglier aspects. That long nose, like, oh boy, what's going on here? It's also still, I know I just praised the size, but I still think this is a more cuter design, which I think Burmy pulls off a lot better. So it's one of those situations where Wormadam is just a little uglier. However, there are some things to appreciate about it. And yes, I do think that the plant cloak is the best cloak. I know you guys like your pizza pie, but it just, this one has flowers. Come on, man. As previously mentioned with Hitmontop, I think Jangmo-o does the whole one scale on its head a lot better because it's a much smaller Pokemon and you have this cute little heart-shaped scale on its head. It really does give into that cuter design. But I still think it's a little ugly. It's mainly the face. It has this really big head, kind of like the problem with Choodle, but obviously not as bad. So a lot of the focus is going to be on the face. Yes, you do have that big scale, but the eyes and mouth jumbled together. Almost to the point where the mouth is higher up on the face than the eyes, and it looks very weirdly put together. I don't know why it needed to be so close to the top of its head. You already have the big scale there. Even though, like, I think the body design is pretty darn good. Like, having the little scales at its sides looks really nice. It's just that face, man. It's so messy. What do you guys want me to say about Swalot? It's very similar to Ditto. I'm gonna be comparing a lot of like the sludge monsters together because it's basically just one is an improvement on the past one. And yes, Swalot has more going on than Ditto. There's a lot more design put into it. I like the little diamonds around its body, and the black goes really well with the dark purple, and the little macaroni mustache I could get around. It's not actually macaroni, but I'm calling it macaroni. The big mouth works obviously because it's a very big body, but just those eyes, why are they so little? And the hands, they're just so small. Swalot is so goofy looking, dude, and I know they're really pushing into it, and I didn't even talk about the little puckered lips. Oh, it's so silly. Now, I don't know, I feel like a couple people are going to be upset about this one with Spoink. It's very unique. I think having the curly tail you'll usually see on a pig become a spring for the Pokemon to move around is brilliant. That is a great idea. And no, it is not because of the gem is its heart, and when it stops bouncing and stops beating. I mean, that kind of is a problem, but it's not shown in the design, so I'm not going to count it. With that being said, it just feels a little messy to me. Spoink looks like a Pokemon that's just 3 pieces put together, and I don't think it goes together very well. I could get behind a spring being the main movement for a Pokemon, and the face is very cute, I'll give it that. But the gemstone on its head, like, I don't like how everything comes together with Spoink. It looks like when you look at Spoink, you're either looking at the gemstone, you're either looking at its face, or you're either looking at its spring. You're never really looking at Spoink as one big cohesive design. It has these 3 main parts that stick out, but I don't think any of it really flow together very well. Stonjourner has so much missed potential. It's really weird. Obviously, the inspiration for this design was the Stonehenge, a bunch of stones that look like little doorways. They're 2 big rocks connected by a big rock on top of the 2. It took that design, okay, cool, it has these big strong legs and arms with other rocks, and then it's just a face. It's just a face. Like, the face isn't even creatively put into the rock. Like, with the legs, you have these little designs at the bottom. They look like little shoelaces. That's cute. And the dirt, it makes up like little shoes. All right, I could appreciate that. But then you have the face, and it's just white lines, and that's it. I think Stonehenge is already a unique enough structure where you could really push it somewhere. There was definitely something done with the feet, like with the mud and the laces. We could have had the face just be what they did with the shoelaces, like a design on the rock, and you could have colored that differently, so it would have worked better. Tynamo is pretty basic. I like how simple the little yellow swirl is. It shows that Tynamo is, you know, a first stage evolution. The only thing that puts me off from it is the mouth. It's just this big gaping hole, and it's a little unsettling. I don't actually think the Klang line is that bad, although Klang is definitely the worst one. Mainly because the focus is on the 2 gears, so you have one that's the same as Klink's, very simple, a very distinct face. And then you have the other one, which is much bigger, has less of a distinct face, but it still gets as much as the attention as the first gear. It just looks a little off for me because it still keeps the concept of 2 gears, or I guess technically 3 at this point, yet the new gear doesn't add much except for size, and it makes the design feel a little lopsided. Alright, now listen up, Girder. This is how you do a nose. I know it's a weird thing to harp on, but I think if you have to do the pink veins, I think a black nose goes much better with it because the pink and black are just a really nice color combination. And something I also really like about Timburr is its little floppy head. It looks like a little puppet doll, and I think it suits that all gray color of it. Although, I still think the veins are a pretty dumb design choice, and holding a log of wood, it's not as interesting. Even the Girder, I think, was much more interesting than just a log of wood. And I always thought it must be so uncomfortable to hold a square piece of wood, like he's gonna get a splinter! Vulluby is a weird one because I actually think its design is pretty clever. I like that the egg makes up a diaper. Some may see that as silly, but it's a baby vulture, so you might as well try to make it cute. And I think that does its job very well. The only issue is, it's so stiff. The eggshell goes up a little too high and it makes the wings look like Vulluby is T-posing rather than just naturally laying down. And the fur around its neck make its head look stiff as well, looking like it's wearing a neck brace. And it really is disappointing to me because I feel like this design could have easily jumped up a few tiers if those 2 issues were fixed. Drowzee is such a weird design, man. It's a little simple, and truth be told, before revising the list, it was actually in the awful tier at one point, but I think it does its job very well, and I think it would be a disservice to the Pokemon to put it in the awful tier. Drowzee's inspiration off the real-world animal, the tapir, is very cool, because it's already a very unique-looking animal, which really stands out with its elephant trunk-like nose. And I think that plays into the concept of Drowzee being a dream eater really well in an unsettling way, but that unsettling nature of Drowzee is really what it's all about. I like how its fingers are pointy and it's jagged when you go up the finger, so when it does its little like spooky finger pose, like you get all the different angles in there. Those sharp fingers also work into the very sly sharp eyes and the pointy ears. I think there really is a lot to like about Drowzee. I just wish there was a lot more done to it. I really love that Rotom has become a more recognizable Pokemon as of late. He was a Pokedex, he was a PC. They're getting really creative with all the appliances Rotom could take form of. And I think it's funny that like no one really talks about Rotom's base form because it's become all of these different things. Because its base form is probably the most boring one. My personal favorite is probably the Alolan Pokedex. I just think it's a really unique shape, and it still has the plasma sticking out of it, which is probably the coolest part about Rotom's normal form. But if you want me to mention Rotom's actual battle forms, my favorite is probably Heat Rotom. I just love that it turns into a microwave oven. It's just so funny. Alright, we're starting to get a little better with the Cocoon Pokemon. Even though Silcoon is still very simple, there is a good amount of detail in it. I like the spikes that come out, I think it's the best part of the Pokemon. But there's still lines all around the body to show that this silk is really wrapping this Pokemon around. I'm not the biggest fan of the silk covering up the eye, but this is a really good start for a good Cocoon Pokemon. Yeah, I mean, I have to put Cascoon next. It's basically the same as Silcoon, except it's purple and it has angry red eyes, which I think give the Pokemon a little more personality, making it better than Silcoon. Graveler is just so boring, man. There's no personality with this Pokemon, mainly in part because the face is just so small on his body, and I think a big problem with it is that the 2 arms on it are like never used. It's always hugging its body, which is odd because having 4 arms on a Pokemon is a really unique concept, but it just looks like it might as well have had 2 arms because 2 of them don't do anything. There's a lot of effort put into Feebas to make it look ugly because they're doing the whole ugly Feebas, beautiful Milotic shtick. And yes, while it still succeeds in being ugly, I do appreciate the effort put into it. It has the ripped fins, it has the spotty skin, it has those sunken in eyes, it has the exposed ribs. There's a lot put into Feebas, and while yeah, it's not appealing at all, there was an effort put into making it look unappealing. Heliolisk looks really cool when it has the frills on its neck sticking out to look like a sun. It's very symbolic of the use of solar energy to power up its electricity. But without it, it's just a very plain Pokemon and kind of awkward in ways as well, how its knees kind of stick outward. And unfortunately, that's how Heliolisk is depicted most of the time. Clefable is really just a big Clefairy. It has bigger wings, it has a bigger tail, has longer ears, but nothing changes on its body. It just looks like a really big Clefairy, and I think Clefairy works a lot better as a smaller design because all of those little details are packed in concisely. When it's Clefable, it's just spread out, and you have a Pokemon with cool detailing on its back, but in the front, it's just a plain pink body. Granbull has similar issues to Clefable where it's just this big plain color body. I think the black collar and the bracelets go really well with the purple coloration. I think it's really funny that Granbull shares a similar confusing design choice to Snubbull, where Snubbull's extra fur looks like a dress, but it's not really a dress and it's the same color as its body, so it looks a little off. And Granbull's lower jaw has 2 fangs, but it's not really fangs, it's the jaw and it's still colored like the rest of its body. Very odd, but I don't think it looks as weird on Granbull as it does on Snubbull, because you would expect these long teeth coming out of a bulldog anyway. But very similar to Clefable, a lot of the body is very plain, and I think a lot more could have been done to it. Okay, I know we like Typhlosion a lot, but honestly, yeah, this is a really, really plain design. Similar to Clefable, there's just no design at all on the body. It's such a bigger body, but there's just nothing there to really make up for it, except for the flame collar. It is such a cool set piece, which alone puts it above Granbull. And then you just have those small but intense eyes, and that gaping mouth with the teeth sticking out. The very top of Typhlosion is cool with the only other thing is a little cape that's made up of the blue fur on its back. A lot of people complain about Typhlosion's 3D model because it looks really boring, but to be honest, the only reason the sprites looked really cool is because it was constantly in that one attack pose. Without the flame collar, honestly, one of the most bland Pokemon designs out there. Drifloon always stuck out to me as one of the new evolutionary lines from Diamond and Pearl, because it admittedly has a really nice color scheme. The purple and yellow go together very well, and of course there's all the lore, but when you get down to looking at its design, it's really messy. To get the good things out of the way, I really do like how its arms are made up of the strings to a balloon. That's very creative, and I really like the patch over its nose, like to cover up a hole. But the issue I have with it is that Drifloon's mouth still comes out of the patch, so it's like the bandage didn't even do anything. amazing. I think the biggest issue for me is the little wind cloud on the top of its head. It's cute to have like the wind blowing it along, but when it's something that's permanently on its head, it looks very slapped on, and I think it hurts the design a lot, and there aren't a lot of really strong design choices to make up for it. Oh, look at that, we're going back to back with the evolution. Drifblim is a Pokemon I think improves on Drifloon, but doesn't get rid of its issues. It still has the bandage problem, it still has the cloud problem, and I also really don't like the red eyes as an addition over black. It's a lot harder to see them, although it does at least match the bottom of it, so it works. The reason Drifblim is higher is because I think the hot air balloon inspiration adds to a lot more creative design choices than Drifloon did. The fact that the bottom of the balloon is now colored red to show the fire heating up the hot air balloon is really clever. The flaps of the hot air balloon make really good use as arms, and they're even designed very well as the yellow to complement the bandage. It's a lot better than Drifloon. Unfortunately though, Drifblim doesn't improve on any of the issues Drifloon had, but there are just more aspects of it to make up for it. Musharna feels like a much more in-depth take on the Dream Eater concept that Drowzee was going for, and I think it succeeds in so many more ways. It doesn't go for as much as a creepy vibe, but just the mist coming out of it, constantly sleeping to show it eating dreams in action. Similar to Drowzee, where the brown and the yellow go together to create a more uneasy feeling. The purple and pink go together really well as that more soothing take on this idea. The reason why it's in the bad tier though is that if you actually look at Musharna when it's awake, it is a really ugly Pokemon. Those eyes just pierce into you. It's one thing to have red eyes, to have the white in the red eyes, it's like, oh man. And then to have those eyelashes while not having any other beauty features on it, along with this gaping hole in its nose. It's a very scary Pokemon actually. Seismitoad is definitely an improvement on Palpitoad. It feels like this line is really focused on using the warts to its advantage, or just the bumps as Pokemon call them. They really feel like in Seismitoad they're used to show a more muscular Pokemon, but they're just so awkwardly placed. Like I understand the shoulders and the hands, but then in between that they have just these really skinny arms, and then there's nothing at all done to the legs, and then you have him on his face falling into his eyes that are just dark red. It's such an awkward design, but there's something here. Yep, it's the Pokeball looking one. There are some aspects to appreciate about Electrode's design though. I think the very simply drawn face works for its just ticking time bomb nature. Those thin lines do a really good job of representing the theoretical thin line that could break at any moment and set off Electrode's explosion. Yes, the next Pokemon where the two lines are right next to each other. I think not having a mouth at all really does help the design, because when you only see its eyes, which are a lot more detailed here, but they're still sharp, it's just a triangle, it's usually always angry. Electrode is a lot more eccentric and in your face with just like that jumpy nature, but Voltorb instills that fear of the explosion. Dugtrio can already be a pretty uncomfortable Pokemon to look at, with all the moles wiggling around so close together. Because they're underground, it's hard to see what's really connecting them, so they're just so bunched up, all squirming around, and it just looks uncomfortable. It's definitely a design where less is more, and with that being said, Diglett's a very simple design, and I think it works because it's not as crowded as Dugtrio is. I feel like they tried to squeeze too much in there, and while there are other Pokemon that will just stick the same Pokemon over and over together, it'll usually tend to form a new creation, where in Dugtrio's case, they all kind of just threw them together and they don't really add anything. With Diglett, it's just the one design. It's telling you it's a mole in the ground. It's interesting because not many Pokemon, or I don't think any Pokemon, do this, where they use the ground to the design's advantage, so they can move around, they can peek their head in and out, making it a lot more creative than you would expect. That little bump on Charmeleon's head, it's just so silly. It really is just like the bigger, angrier Charmander. It's got that darker red flare to it to show, oh, it's becoming a little mean. Those more intense eyes and the claws. But that cool factor isn't completely there yet, and it's mainly because of that little head spike. It looks so silly. Snover is a bit of a hard design to pinpoint. Like, you can tell there's a tree inspiration here. I actually think the brown, the shade of green, and the white really look nice together. I love how the green are its arms, so it's a good way to make the body stand out from the hands. And it even uses its feet for roots. It's pretty good, but it kind of loses you at the face. There's just two eyes under there, and it's not creatively put into the Pokemon. And then the top of its head looks like a little hat, and the design doesn't flow into the top half of its body. It's a very pretty concept, but the execution could have been put together a lot better. Yes, I know Darumaka's origin is a Daruma doll, but that doesn't mean I think the design is very good. But let's get the good things out of the way. When Darumaka is asleep, I think it's actually very adorable, just sitting there, because I think when the arms and legs come out, it's a little awkward. They're very stubby, and it always has the hands and the feet outstretched because the fire gives it energy. But it's kind of like the Quilladin and Pignite problem, where the body's so round and the limbs are so tiny that the hands and legs just look kind of awkward sitting there. And then you have the eyes and the mouth all squished together, being pushed down by those big eyebrows. It's really ugly in some instances. I think its Galarian form is a lot better. Okay, here we go. We have a Pokemon that looks like a Pokeball, but the concept's a little better. Instead of Electrode and Voltorb kind of just being a thing that looks like a Pokeball, they actually use it to integrate it into a design. Now, I don't know if a mushroom would look exactly like a Pokeball, but they do have some odd designs, so using an odd design to make it look like a Pokeball is pretty nice. There's not much more done with it, it's just the mushroom with a Pokemon design, but we're taking a step further with the whole looks like a Pokeball Pokemon. Alright, I gotta get it out of the way. The little caveman animal print shirt that they used for a design on Croconaws' body is adorable. Unfortunately for Croconaw though, it would introduce an issue to the Totodile line that does hurt the overall design, and that's this overemphasis on designing the jaw. They do this weird curve by the snout, and they do this weird circle by the hinge of the jaw, and then they have the teeth sticking out around the hinge. It's very odd looking. And because Croconaw is such a stubby Pokemon, it doesn't have enough of a neck to show this weird shape of its jaw, so it looks all squished together a lot of the time, which is an unfortunate case for the Pokemon, but hey, at least there's that caveman body design. You know why Simisage is here. What is going on with its head? The Pokedex says it's a leaf, but no, that is a full-on shrub growing out of its head. It's just, I don't know why it's so massive. It takes all of the attention away from the Pokemon. In fact, it actually does a decent job of doing a grass monkey design. You see all different shapes of leaves growing around its tail, its legs, its arms, showing off its different body features, and it actually looks really nice. But oh my goodness, the leaf on its head is way too massive, and it takes all the attention away, and it's so big that it just looks silly. Alright, I will give them this. A snail with its shell being knight armor is really clever. That's a really clever design. And you know what? There's nothing really wrong with this one except for its little lips. Why is it going for a little smooch? It's probably because the armor is sticking out so much, you want to show the people that there is a snail in here. The long kissy face, it's like, oh, put that away. Jellicent is actually a really neat concept. I like the king and queen jellyfish. We are just doing the male form here today because of the form rule, but I will say the male form is much better than the female form because the face in the female form just gets squished up. Unfortunately, the male form also suffers an issue. The mustache is just so massive, and the other design on it, the crown and the eyes, they get a little smushed, and the crown is so tiny. It's just the mustache is so big and it takes up so much of the design that you can't really focus on anything else. It's not as ugly as Simisage, but it's still like, alright, relax, we got it. You got a mustache. Whoa, 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 whoa. I thought you said that Pokemon without a face aren't good because you can't make a connection to them. I know I said that, but I think Minior works around that issue very well. I think the design of the shell is actually really creative. And while yes, the core forms are cute because they have the little swirly eyes and their happy face and the bright colors, I think with the shell, you get that cool artistic design to it. This shell giving off this vibe of this old wrap that's used to preserve ancient artifacts. The way the eyebrows are drawn on, little spikes around each point of the meteor, those dark black eyes with the brown design slightly going into one, and all the cracks forming along the shell ready for the meteor to break out of it. Yes, it definitely does suffer from not having a face, but the shell shows that there is a face-like design put into it, and there's still that mystery behind it, which I would imagine is kind of the point of the meteor form. The main issue with Scatterbug is that the bottom of its body is so long and the top is so skinny, and then it has this giant head supported on this little neck. It's almost fine, but it's just, yeah, there's some weird stuff about it. Beartic. Oh my goodness. I have a lot of issues with Beartic, but it's still a polar bear Pokemon. It has that menacing nature of it, has the big claws. The Ice Beard is a really cool idea, but just, that's it. That's really it. It has a lot of fur by its belly, and it's like, alright, I guess it's kind of just there. I know polar bears have the skinny tip of the head, but this is a Pokemon. You already gave it a big Ice Beard. It just looks like there was nothing else done to it. I do wish the Ice Beard stuck out a little. It looks like it's just plastered onto its mouth, but you know what? At least there is something there. There's nothing really going on with the rest of its body, and what is going on with the fur in its belly, it's just like, why is that there? As an iceberg Pokemon, I like that Avalugg is just this completely iced out creature, just this giant force walking around. I like that they have the purple in the cracks of the iceberg. It's really neat actually, and a nice contrast to the light blue of its body. But it's just the flat top. There's always the joke that Avalugg looks like a coffee table, and like, yeah, it's just a completely flat top, which is to resemble a glacier a bit more, which I can respect, but they could be bumps, there can be spikes, and I think you could have made a really neat set piece with the spikes on Avalugg's body. It didn't have to be the entire thing, but just something, even if it was just on its head. Tentacool has a neat concept going on. I love the red crystals on the top of its head. It's really nice. You'd think they're like jelly sacks. The only issue I have with Tentacool is that the face is just so squished together at the bottom. There's no mouth, the eyes are getting pressed in by the top of its head and the flaps at the bottom of its body, and it just leaves it with these just sad looking eyes. I like the sharp eyes and the design of its body. But there's nothing really else there. There's the little flame mustache it has going on. There's some design to the body as well, but besides that, it's just very plain. There's nothing really going on here. Maybe if there was some little flaming eyebrows up there, it would have helped it stick out a little more. Oh, it's the boogie nose. You guys knew it was coming. Little snot. I know that's a popular design choice in Eastern animation and anime, but like, oh, it's just, it's so big. Maybe make it a little small. I don't know. I don't think it needed it. It's just a big snot nose, and Cubchoo's already really cute. It has those twinkly little eyes. You even colored the face differently to differentiate it from the rest of its body. Honestly, it's like the opposite of Beartic. I think they did a little too much here. It's just a shell with a tongue and eye sticking out. It's not even like Tangela, where it's like wrapped in mystery, but it also makes more sense than Tangela at the same time because it's still a noticeable thing, like it's a little clam. I like when Shelter closes its shell, the little tongue sticks out. That's funny, that's cute. But like, you could have done more than that. Cherubi's a cute little cherry Pokemon. I like the colors, like the little darker red stripe. It's just a small other cherry that serves as a nutrients pouch for Cherubi. It's just a little off-putting. Ah, that's just cute. Look at his little happy face. I think the red goes really well with the blue, although it does have a bit of an issue to what Sentret had where the colors kind of blend in together. The dark red could get a little lost into the dark blue at times. However, I do like that the feet can kind of be seen as the bottom of a radish. That is a good creative choice with the design. But yeah, it could still just be written up as a radish with a face on it. Sunflora, it's a sunflower with a face on it. These past three have just been an object with a face on it, but I think slowly we're starting to get a little more creative. Sunflora's leaves make up the arms, the roots at the bottom make up the legs. There's something here, but there could have been a little more. I do find it a little weird that Togepi's egg design just basically became Togetic's entire body design. Like, it looked like Togepi was supposed to evolve into what was inside the egg, but now the design from the egg has become the body itself. The light blue and red looks really good on the all-white body. However, the all-white body is what I believe hurts Togetic. There's all these new features to it. The wings, this really long neck with the face. I feel like there could have been a lot more design put into this Pokemon than just the shapes on its body. It's already a bit of a weird shape with the really long neck and the really short arms, but I think if you just gave the body a little more design and colors, it could have been something really pretty. Weepinbell suffers a bit from the Golbat problem. It's just that really big mouth. I do appreciate the pitcher plant inspiration. It looks a lot more concise and put together than the gangly design Bellsprout was going for. But if you look at a pitcher plant, you'll see it has those really big lip-looking things, and it's a little unsettling. And Weepinbell takes that, adds eyes, and as a result, it's a really in-your-face Pokemon. So while I think it's a step up from Bellsprout, there's still definitely those features of, alright, calm down here. Machop is an odd design. I like the plates in the head, it gives it a very unique looking face. And then there's nothing really in terms of a design for the rest of the body. You have the lines underneath the chest, which is supposed to show muscles or the rib cage, and then you have all the fingers. But then besides that, it's just a plain blue body, which is odd. It just gives the illusion that the Pokemon is just naked. And when you have a really recognizable face, it's weird that the rest of the body doesn't follow suit with that. Alright, Let me explain. Wooper is a Pokemon that is very silly looking, but I will give it credit that it looks as if it was designed to look silly looking. It's based off the Axolotl, and if you look at it side by side, it actually looks very similar to one. It has the very simple face, it has the antenna gills, which are actually a really nice touch on Wooper. And look, they even designed its body with 3 lines. Oh, it's just the no hands and the face. It's so dopey looking. And silly designs are not bad, but Wooper really comes across as a Pokemon that's just enjoyed for its personality and its more dim-witted nature than its actual design. And we're getting close to the point where we're gonna start talking about some pretty decent designs. Those ones that just have those really awkward features are going to have to be judged accordingly. Zubat is definitely a step up from Golbat. It doesn't have this huge mouth anymore. It's a very straightforward bat. I wish it had eyes. It's a little plain to look at without them. Zubat gets a lot of hate just because of how often it'll spawn in a cave, but if you really look at its design, it's not as bad as its reputation is. Ursaring is such a boring design, man. Oh my goodness. I know it's gonna sound like I'm being a lot more negative towards Pokemon that are ranked higher than Pokemon I've spoken decently positive about, and that's because I just think there's more potential here. When you have someone like Cherubi, it's just a cherry. It's a decently designed cherry, but it's just a cherry. But when you take Ursaring, it has so many different features you could work with. Just a circle? That's it? There could have been so much more done. I like the little fluffs of fur over its arm. There's something there, and again, the claws are nice. It's this big menacing bear, and it's just a circle. It's such a shame. Flabébé is an interesting one because it's one of the many Pokemon that has the advantage of using an object in tandem with its design. In this case, a flower. It has very cool inspiration from the Flower Fairy. I like the little halo around its head. The fact that it's so small, it could use pollen to make a crown, which is a very creative use. It has these nice long ears that create a nice center point for the crown, and itself will look like the bottom of a flower with the stem. There is a cute start here, but there's not too much to really hook you. And similar to Machop, there's not much design past the face in Flabébé, and the flower is just a flower. There's no real design taken there either. It's a good start, but there definitely can be improvements. Boltund really suffers from those eyes. I think it was definitely a very cute statement made, and it works for Yamper because it's a very small little dog, which is designed overall to be cute first and foremost, while Boltund definitely has a much more serious edge to him. I love how its fur sticks up like an electric bolt when it attacks. It really is those eyes that hurt it from being any higher. They look way too out of place with this design that does not feel like it's going for a very cute Pokemon. The black line design along Electabuzz feel a lot more natural than what was on Elekid. The more jagged paintbrush looking edges look like it's really part of the fur, and also plays into that really savage nature of Electabuzz. Unfortunately, the body proportions are just really awkward. It's really bottom heavy in terms of its forearms, its lower waist, and like it's a lot more crunched up by the top of its body, and then you just have a real flat head on top of it and barely even a neck. There are some benefits to this. Electabuzz really does look like if you got hit with its forearms, it would just be a real clubbing blow, but it still is really weirdly put together. Tapu Bulu's design is really messy. There's so much detail trying to be packed into this, on top of it already being very awkwardly structured as a tiki. Now, when it does close up and look like a tiki head, it's really cool looking. And overall, I think the coloration is really nice. The biggest issue comes with the hooves and the bell. So you have the arms, which of course, would represent the bull's legs. And then you have the bell, which is usually around the bull's neck. it creates this really weird combination of making the bull look like it's just its face, because the bell is right underneath the face usually on a bull, but then you have the arms on top of the bell, so it's very, very messily structured. But the coloration and the tiki design, such as the strokes of white and all the lines in between the eyes, there is a lot of effort packed into it, which is really appreciated. Vileplume is a good mix of good and bad. You have this really big flower now where the red coloring complements the dark blue and actually makes you notice those red eyes so it doesn't blend into the blue as much, even though they're small. The issue is, besides the flower, Vileplume's body is pretty boring. It's just a bigger blue body like Oddish. It has little arms and legs now, but the legs don't look like roots as much. So while the flower is a big statement and definitely the main point of this Pokemon, I would have liked to seen a lot more done to the rest of it. Oh, don't cry, Azurill, it's not your fault, it's the tail's fault. Yes, the issue with the Azurill is that, while its face is actually decently designed, it has the cute little ears with the pink insides that also match with the pink inside of its mouth, and it has the two little dots on its face, so when it's sad it could also double as tears, but the issue is the big tail that it bounces on. It's roughly the same size as its body, and there's no design to it. It takes up about half the space as Azurill, and because of that, when you look at it, half of it is just nothing but a solid blue color. I think it's safe to say Smoochum's definitely a step up from Jinx. For one, I think the colors are okay, although Smoochum still isn't a super appealing Pokemon. The hair is very messy, and because the face and lips are both pink, they kind of blend in with each other, making a pretty odd visual. Seeking has a Paris problem where it's just way too much in the face. I actually like the design of the full body. The black on the white fins are really nice, and the black over the red are cool, and the horn is a really nice addition as well. But when you get to those eyes, they're just way too realistic looking. And then you get to its mouth, just the lips with the teeth sticking out of it. It's very ugly actually, which is a shame because it evolved from Goldeen, which was designed to be a very pretty fish. Slurpuff's odd because it's based off of a meringue cake, so it has that sloppiness to it, and it actually kind of works. The fur is meant to look like icing around its body, whipped cream for its hair, and a cherry on the top. And it's a really nice idea, but it's that sloppiness that ruins it, with the short hands and the tongue sticking out and the droopy mouth. It's interesting to have a design off of a dessert where you focus on the more gluttonous nature of eating a cake rather than the cake's actual presentation, but it doesn't make the design very appealing. Skarmory always struck me as a Pokemon that really looked like it needed another evolution, because while the metallic bird concept is really cool and the red goes really well with the silver body, it just doesn't look all that powerful. The wings look so stiff because of their nature and never looks natural when they're flapping. Then the face looks really weirdly put together. You have that crevice for the jaw on the bottom, which already looks a little awkward, and then you have the whole top of the head that looks like a completely different plate, which does make a cool design for the eye, but just that combined with the stiff wings makes Skarmory look more like a plastic toy rather than this powerful armored bird. Chimecho suffers from a similar problem to Azurill, where just there's so much of its body that isn't designed, even though the main face of it is really nice looking. I love the yellow in contrast to the red and white, and overall the color scheme is really good, but it's just that wind chime nature. The tail of Chimecho, which is supposed to look like a Japanese paper that is hung from a wind chime, is just very plain. It's the white and red like on its body, but because it's so much bigger, there's not much design to it. My biggest issue with Electric is just how lopsided the fins are. It looks really cool in a certain pose, but once it actually moves, the fins are just at the top and the bottom of its face. It's either really awkward looking on its side, or just decent looking standing up. The feather placement on Sneasel is just very awkward. I think it was a huge improvement with Weavile to just make it this big headpiece, but with Sneasel, while the feathers look fine sticking out of the tail, it looks really jarring to just see it sticking out of one side of the head, and would have really benefited from a more subtle use of it. Besides that, the claws coming out of Sneasel are really cool. I think the red on the darker body looks great, and the gold going through it is also a really nice touch. Alright, Johto fans, I'm sorry. I promise I don't have, like, a vendetta against you. I know this is the third, like, really popular Pokemon I put in the bad tier, but I have my reasons, I promise. Okay, so Ampharos being a shaven sheep is a really interesting idea, actually, and I think the coloration is really nice, although there can be a very easy misconception for it looking more like a giraffe than a sheep. It just looks really awkward, and it's mainly the arms. They're just so small. So when Ampharos moves, they're just flailing there, and there's no design to them. Flaffy had the advantage of hiding its stubbier arms because of the wool around its neck. It was covering it a little bit. I think the black lines do a really good job of covering up the longer neck and longer tail. The face also just looks a little too small in comparison to the rest of its body. There just needed to be a couple adjustments to the sizes of the arms and the heads, and maybe a little detail on the arms to really do it justice. Duperter's inspiration off of the diving bell spider leads to a really creative design. A type of insect-like water creature is really cool, and the double usage of its thorax to walk around and also holding the water bubble around its head is super creative. The only issue with Duperter is its face. It's a really, really unappealing face, with the constantly open mouth, the cross-eye, the wrinkle above them, and the blue bumps over its head. It's just very unappealing. That only got this high because its body is so interesting. Kyurem is an odd design because it looks like its purpose is more of a device rather than its own thing. The two wings on its back that have a plug-like design, and also its fusion concept, make it feel like it's supposed to be connected to Reshiram or Zekrom. While in its base form, it's very hunched over, it has these two uneven wings. There's some cool things to appreciate about it. I like how the ice on it acts like armor around its face, making its jaw and shielding the rest of it. But just the overall awkward nature, the small arm, the uneven wings. It's a Pokemon that really relies on its fusions to bring out its full potential. The white coloration and the fluffiness of its wings and tail give this Pokemon a very relaxing vibe, and a lot of the features are very smooth and not super detailed, which I think hurts it in its eyebrows and its eyes. The yellow is a nice touch, but I don't think the pink goes well with the rest of the design. The colors give it a type of Play-Doh vibe, unfortunately, and I don't think it looks natural, and it absolutely could have used more detail. It hurts the Pokemon from sticking out, even with its crazy attack animation. The statement with the afro on Bouffalant is striking. It's a little too big, unfortunately, and I think it takes away from the nicely colored eyes and the lines underneath it. The rings are a little too much. The afro's already really big, so by decorating it even more with jewelry, it just becomes too much and starts to look a little tacky. Diggersby is just naturally very messy looking. Brown just isn't a very appealing cover, and it makes the Pokemon look very dirty, although I do think the fists as ears are actually a really, really cool concept. It looks so weird for the ears above its head to look like they're supporting it because they're so small. The fur also doesn't look very well integrated into the design. It just looks like something it's wearing rather than the fur of the Pokemon. I know I will previously and continue to critique the closed eyes nature of certain Pokemon and how it loses the personality, although Diggersby definitely has a lot to spare with the fist around its head, and I think the closed eyes and the smile actually give it a better personality because it's a messy Pokemon. It's giving into it, it's showing it off. But just the awkward choices of the fur and the small ears underneath the fists, and yes, it is still a pretty unappealing overall design. Diggersby, though, does have a lot to appreciate about it. The very gangly nature of Fearo's neck and face and beak is what put it in the bad tier for me. I do like the powerfulness of the design, although it is a little too naturally colored for how big the design is. It does help showing off its more irritable personality by how sharp and jagged it is. And the red coxcomb above its head does a really good job of acting like a mohawk, and a much needed extra color in this Pokemon's design. One of the most unpopular Generation 6 Pokemon, or one of the most unpopular Pokemon in general. Yes, Barbaracle is not that bad. Now, yes, it does still share the same issues that Binacle does. I think the hand face is kind of lame. It's just an almost closed hand, and it's just so uncreative, especially when you have all the other Barnacles around with the one eyes. You just have two eyes on the inside of a palm of a partially closed hand. It just looks so dumb. But everything else, it is just so creative. All the Barnacles now are forming arms around the Pokemon, legs, it's holding together the stones which make up its body. And while a lot of people make fun of the hand face, yes, it does look dumb on its face, but the rest of the hand faces around its body that make up its other parts are really well placed. Again, there are some really unflattering choices on this Pokemon, but overall, there's so much creativity packed in here. Budew is a Pokemon that's literally wrapped together really nicely. One odd thing about Budew's design is that it doesn't have any arms, so it's a little bit of the Wooper problem. But the bud can be mistaken for a type of arms, so it just looks like it has two arms that are just wrapped around above its head, and it's a bit of an odd look. I really wanted to like Tyrogue because it's another one of those Pokemon that really just don't get any attention, but it's just such a bland design. The very light purple and the brown pants and shoes, it's so boring, this color palette. I think it does the more humanoid fighting type design better than Machop does. The little bumps in the head to make a mohawk is appreciated, the angry eyes with the yellow, the circles around its head add some much needed structure to the face, and you got those three fingers that look like it's just ready to grab onto something and fight. And the tape around the body and arms are a really nice touch actually. It really gives that vibe of this Pokemon training to be stronger someday, just like any other anime protagonist. So there is a lot of design to appreciate in Tyrogue, but just the overall package is just so bland. The retractable flame spikes are definitely the signature of the Cyndaquil line, and Cyndaquil does it much better than Typhlosion does. When the flames are off, you have all those little red spots behind it, so there's a lot more to see. So why is Cyndaquil still in the bad tier? Well, it's the face. Now, Cyndaquil is based off of an echidna, which means he doesn't chuckle. And also, it means he has a really long nose, which can be an issue for the mouth underneath the nose, because now Cyndaquil has to awkwardly lift up his entire head so you see the mouth. So then you have the blue leading down the nose sticking out, you have the lines of the eyes arcing into the nose. It's too much. And the Cyndaquil line will always have an issue that the flame, the main signature of this Pokemon, are out just as often as they're on, so you have to grade them both ways, and without the flame, Cyndaquil really loses a lot of its appeal. Similar to Heliolisk, when the frills come out on Helioptile, it's actually a really nice sight to see. Although that's not to say the design and shape of the head are bad at all, it's actually the best part of Helioptile's design. The problem though is that it looks like a bobblehead. It does not look like there's any chance that body is holding up that big head. It's so small, it's so skinny, the arms always just dangling there. It's a little awkward. It's very similar to how Heliolisk's arms are just hanging there as well. Although overall, the design of Helioptile is not as bad. Clearly, it's a lot higher up on the list. While the whole flat body is definitely a unique aspect about Stunfisk, it definitely doesn't save it from looking a little silly looking. And the biggest issue I have with Stunfisk's design that isn't because of its flat nature is that I just don't like that its eyes and mouth are all basically lined up with each other. It definitely adds to that awkward and silly nature of the Pokemon that didn't need any more of it. What's a shame about Espurr is that even though it's a very cute cat, the lack of design to it leads it to be very forgettable. There's definitely some personality here due to its, well, lack of personality. It really looks like a more extreme version of Psyduck where it's holding back a giant burst of psychic power, except this time it's a lot more serious in tone, rather than Psyduck's more silly take on it. But it's just a little fuzzy cat, there's not much more past that, and one part of its design I do think could be better is that the ears are just really small. It feels like if it's supposed to be covering up its psychic power from leaking out, it should be a little bigger. It's very easy to see the little yellow insides of Espurr's fur underneath the ear, and I feel like if you could see it, then, well, the ears aren't doing a very good job of keeping that concealed. Exploud feels like it's a little too much. Loudred did a great job of showing off a Pokemon with a big mouth and a sound theming, where Exploud's mouth feels like it gets too big for the rest of its body. The face is just massive, the arms are so small, the legs are so stubby, the tubes coming out of its head and its tail are a nice design, but the sheer size of its face and mouth just overtakes any design on its body, which is the point, it's the loud noise Pokemon, but there's just too much focus on it, leaving the design to be very messy, and there's not enough to compensate for that over-reliance on its face. How do we rate Spinda if its design's always changing? Luckily, the spots really don't matter. I will admit there are some awkward positions of Spinda, but we're just gonna go off of the official artwork that Spinda uses, where the spots seem to be in a pretty normal place. But what's weird is that even though Spinda has two noticeable traits about it, the spots and its dizziness, it still ends up being a pretty bland and forgettable design at points, especially in a generation that introduced Plusle, which looks very similar to it. But when Plusle was in that same generation, doing the tan and red body concept, being based off of a much more successful design, and also just a lot more cleanly designed, it leaves Spinda feeling like an off-brand Pikachu clone, even though there is a lot to recognize about it. That isn't Spinda's fault per se, it doesn't really have much to do with its own design, although I will say that the dizziness gimmick Spinda has doesn't really make the design feel like a normal Pokemon. The overall design and personality of its dizziness handicaps its appeal in a way. I do not understand the appeal for this Pokemon. It looks straight up like a middle evolution. It just doesn't look finished in a lot of ways. And even with all that, it still seems to be the most popular Pokemon from its generation. I will say I do like the shorts and the socks design. Rabbits do have very big feet, so leaning into a soccer concept or football is very smart actually. But just everything above the waist, like where did everything go? There's the blue fur around its waist and neck, which is supposed to make it look like it's wearing a shirt, even though it barely gives off that illusion because its whole body is always white. And then you get up to the face, and what is that headpiece up there? It just looks so stuck on. It's just a random red patch of fur on its head. While the bottom half of its design looks really well put together, the top half just looks so stuck on, and there's no flow and just doesn't look polished. One thing I do really like about Toxel is that the little electric bolt coming out of its head is a weak little volt, showing that it's a baby, which goes into the rest of its design. And I do like how the diaper coloration, the lighter purple, matches the color of the tail. It makes the diaper look a lot more natural on the Pokemon. It's just the face, the little tongue sticking out. I know it's a baby, it's supposed to be a little silly and dopey, but then you mix that silly little tongue with its serious looking eyes, its almost angry eyes. It's a really weird combination, and it offsets the vibe of this Pokemon. And even though it does give it personality, it just adds in a couple odd and a little ugly traits that were just unnecessary. Ooh, Dhelmise is an interesting design, and I really enjoy the creativity that went around here. I like how the anchor is stuck together to the wheel with the seaweed. It's a really creative way to get the two together, but I don't think they look necessarily good together. It really is just the unbalance of weight and size. Whenever Dhelmise lets down its anchor, there's this big heavy anchor sitting there and just this little helm holding it up. It feels like it should be attached to like a base to really pull it all together. It's a very different design, and it does look really cool in a lot of ways, but when you have a design that is so unique, there's bound to be some times where it just looks a little odd. And there's just a lot of instances in this design in particular where those two pieces don't look like they flow together very well. Castform's just a cute little guy. I like the little mask it has. The different shades of gray were put to good use here. I would have liked to see a little more color because it does make the design look a little bare. That is the point of its forms, to be fair, to really take this Pokemon's personality into different directions. Although that's not what we're rating today, and what we have with Castform isn't terrible, but it's still a really, really plain design. And the cells combining to make what looks like a cloud at the bottom of its body is really oddly shaped, where the two puffs on the front of its body look fine in comparison to the head, but the back of its body is so much smaller, and at certain angles look like it's not even there at all. It needed to flow a lot better in that respect. And if you were wondering what my favorite form of Castform was, it would definitely be the Sunny form. It's just so cute and full of energy. Sunkern's design is a little odd. It's supposed to be based off of a sunflower seed, although it looks like a bag of seeds that was opened up due to the spikes coming out of its head, and the eyes could have been much better integrated into its design. I get that it's already a sunflower seed, although if you made the eyes like more realistic versions of sunflower seeds, that could have made for a really creative eye. I do like the little sprout coming out of its head though. There's nothing terrible about its design, although for such a simple concept, they really could have taken it a lot further and been more creative with it. Heatmor has a really, really cool design that's just ruined by how weird its face looks. But before we get to that, the Flame Tongue is so cool and serves as such a unique way to use the fire type aspect in this Pokemon. The brown going around its body and its tail almost make it look metallic in a way, like pipes going around it. However, it still keeps it looking natural. The claws look like little shovels or drills. This whole body leads up to this big crescendo on its face, and then there's just nothing to write home about. It's so smooth and small and slender, which means there's not much to design about it. The eyes on it are pretty simplistic, with how designed its body is all coming together really well, I may add. It's just so jarring and disappointing for the face, the thing that you draw a connection to, a sense of personality from the Pokemon, just being so simplistic. Perugly is one of those Pokemon like Feebas where it's supposed to be ugly, and they do that concept well. It's just, they're still ugly. And where do I even start here? The body is really oddly proportioned. The white and the gray designed around it are supposed to give the illusion that it's wearing like a shirt and a little skirt and little leggings. That's gross. The head is shaped like a boomerang, which I think legitimately is a pretty bad design choice. The ears and the face all look connected. The whiskers are all jagged, although they are at least symmetrical with each other, so that was a nice way of making the design look ugly. Overall, a very ugly and unappealing Pokemon, which did do its job and in some ways does succeed in its ugliness, but it's still ugly. While Hypno does not retain the signature nose of Drowzee, it still has enough personality to make up for it. The swinging pendulum is really cool. I know it's a Pokemon with a human-made object, but it just fits with Hypno's really creepy design. It does have the white fur around its neck resembling a ruff, which admittedly is an odd thing to add to this design, although it works really well with it. I also like how the ears and the nose are all pointy and sharp, and the eyes just look full of bad intention. There's nothing really to this design past the pendulum and the white fur, unfortunately, but with how little was added to Hypno's design, that legitimate creepy vibe it gives off is shining through. Tropius is a really cool concept being based off of the sauropod, but also integrating tree-like features to it, with of course fruit being able to grow off of its neck. The place where Tropius loses me is that it's also a flying type, which means its leaves help it fly, which is a really cool idea, but when it's flying, it just looks so awkward. Like, there is zero way these leaves are making it fly. It's a Pokemon that I feel like really could use an evolution, or if its design was to be fixed, it just needs bigger, more impressive leaves. Muna's definitely a lot cuter than Musharna. There's nothing really big and ugly about it like when Musharna wakes up. I do like the little floral pattern over its body. The purple and pink and the different shades of pink go together really well. The only problem is that it just looks like it bonked into a wall. The front of its face is so flat and its nose just droops over its face, and there's just a big hole coming out of the front of its face. It works for Musharna when the mist is coming out of the hole, but for Muna where the mist is not usually coming out, it's just something that really sticks out of its design in an unpleasant way. Venomoth. Take the Paris problem and slap it onto a moth. The eyes are just way too realistic. It's a pretty moth design. The shades of purple go together really nice. It's just those eyes, man. They're just way too realistic and give this Pokemon a much creepier vibe than it needed. Oh, I don't think Snom is a good design. Let me explain myself. First off, the ice type integration. I really don't like how the icy spikes on Snom's back are just stuck onto it. It would have looked so much more natural if there were just icy spikes coming out of its body. And when you get to its face, the ice just completely cuts off in a clean line. It looks like a little piece of an action figure that was stuck onto it that's removable, rather than an actual part of its body. That's one thing. The eyes are just so low around its mouth. Also, there's just no mouth. It's just two little nubs. It just looks unsettling. All parts of its design are not well executed. And I'm gonna move on to the next Pokemon now, because I know you guys already are upset about this one. Oh, why is the skull so little? This is the headbutt Pokemon. Before we get to that, the rest of its body is okay. The spikes are nice touches, although I don't know how it functions with them on its knees. Its arms are really small, and it's just really awkward looking. Although I get it, it's based off of the Pachycephalosaurus, but it still just looks awkward. I do like that its eyes are just this intense red. I love that touch. It just makes it look like this Pokemon is just focused on nothing but destruction. But going back to the main issue with this Pokemon, its skull, it's so little. It's like there's room up there. Look at the top of its head. There's space up there for its head. The whole point of its destruction is the skull, and the skull is so tiny. It's so unimpressive. Granidos has similar problems to Rampardos. First off, I do like the light blue. It looks really nice with the silver. And I like the splash and design of the light blue on the back of its tail. But at least the skull fits its head. It's so much better looking that way. The arms still make its overall body look awkward looking, which is why it's right after Rampardos. They still share very similar issues in this line. Although Granidos does have one that isn't much of a problem for Rampardos, and that's its face. Now, I'm not going to act like Rampardos' face was appealing. It also just has this this really weirdly shaped jaw. Rampardos' jaw is shaped to look like it has fangs right at the bottom of it, where with Cranidos, it looks like it just has these big puffy cheeks. That cuteness clashing with the intensity of its eyes and its awkward arms leave the design looking overall pretty awkward. I think no one's gonna buy that I think Quagsire is a better design than Wooper. One thing Wooper, I will say, does do better than Quagsire is that, while I do think Wooper has a lot of odd design decisions, at least it had some decent design in there with the antennas and the symbol on its belly. And while the back of Quagsire's body is pretty well designed, I really like how the purple and the tail look. The front is just plain blue, and there's no design there at all. It carries over that minimalist face from Wooper, meaning overall it looks like there's really no design to it, it's just a big blue blob. So while there's definitely a case of the Pokemon getting bigger, but not a lot of design to compensate for that is there. Just overall, I think Quagsire is a more well-rounded design than Wooper, although I will admit there's just not really a lot going on here. Bibarel is in a similar boat to Boltund, where it's trying to carry over the cuteness of its pre-evolution, but doesn't really pull it off. It's not as awkward as Boltund, but the eyes on Bibarel always came across a little too small for it. It's trying to carry over that cute, just a plain circle and a dot in the middle of the eyes, just like Bidoof had, but the simplicity for Bibarel with this much bigger body just comes across as a little creepy in its evolution. Blissey's limbs have just become way too small in comparison to the rest of its body. Chansey already had a little bit of this problem, but the fact that Blissey now has the fur around its body, the white fur, yes, that is fur, it looks like a little dress it's wearing, it just makes those limbs look a lot smaller, and the little wings from the fur just feel a little too small, especially around the waist. It comes across just looking a little too small and accentuates how tiny these little limbs are on its body. While Shroomish may seem to be in the same boat as an Oddish or a Cherubi where it's just a face plastered on a little plant, Shroomish has a little more depth to it. The brown top of its body overlaying and creating little flaps over the green bottom adds some layers to the design, combined with a much better color scheme. Raticate dives completely into this just feral rat, with its giant teeth, its fingers always bent, and all of its messy fur. However, the teeth being way too big looking for its mouth, it never looks like it could really shut its mouth, which just looks uncomfortable. And also its hands and feet not really having any limbs, especially its hands, they just kind of are stuck to its body, leave this design looking a little awkward and uncomfortable looking. Meganium is too simple for its own good and was a lot lower on the list for a while, but I've grown to appreciate a little bit. The nice long antenna with the yellow matching its yellow eyes are really nice looking, but the problem is it's just this big sauropod, all green body, and the only design to its body is a flower around its neck. That's it for its whole body, just one big flower. It's very plain looking, and when you have so many Pokemon that incorporate flowers into its design, it definitely makes it struggle to stick out, even with that added boost of popularity just from being a Final Evolution starter. Dragonite is already a very soft and cuddly looking dragon, and for a while I didn't really like that it was just so huggable looking. I always pictured dragons to be like big and ferocious. I know Charizard's not a dragon, but kind of like that vibe. But over the years I've grown to appreciate the different direction they went with Dragonite, making it more of a lovable dragon. The problem is that it already kind of looks lovable and silly and dopey a little bit because of that nature. But when you add that little horn to its head, it goes from an endearing kind of dopey to just a bad design choice. What is that horn gonna do? Seriously, what is that horn gonna do? It's too small to look like it really serves any purpose to Dragonite's combat capabilities. When you have a design that's so delicate, with a cuddly dragon that's also supposed to be really powerful, you can't really add anything to its design that would make it be taken less seriously than its nature would already suggest. Draudigon's design is definitely an acquired taste of what a dragon should look like, but it just feels like too much, and there's a lot of body proportions that just don't feel right. The wings are really small, the arms are really long, the head is just really tiny as well. There's not a ton of depth to its design. The bumps around its skin combine as its teeth. I don't really mind the loudness of the colors. It doesn't look natural, to be fair, but the blue and red are a statement which matches Draudigon's really bumpy and spiky design. It's really loud, and it's extremely loud design, where it embraces that really loud nature and kind of works, but there's just too many awkward and in-your-face aspects of its design to really put it any higher. I appreciate the idea of making the flotation sac around Floatzel like a king's robe. It does add to that intimidation. The problem is the flotation sac is so small around its body and thin, so that the rest of Floatzel's body has to stretch out to meet it and make it all fit together, which leaves Floatzel's body that isn't the flotation sac looking really long and flat and stretched out, and it's a really awkward look. They really just needed to make the flotation sac bigger so that the body didn't look like it was compensating for the small size of it. Toxicroak is a really cool evolution of Croagunk, especially with the claws coming out of its hands, doubling as a blade it fights with. Really smart way to evolve the poison jab concept. But there's just a lot of odd things that take away from that coolness. I don't like the placement of the poison sac around its neck. It just seems like it's slapped on there. The horn on its head looks kind of silly. It already has the claws. What does it need another horn for? It's not going to be attacking with it. And especially the mouth. The teeth always out is a very odd look. It worked for Croagunk, but for Toxicroak, who's supposed to come across as this big, merciless fighter, the teeth coming out just looks really silly and takes away from it. And the little lips, it looks like it's wearing lipstick over them. So combine that with the horn and the placement of the poison sac, it just makes this really intimidating Pokemon a lot sillier than it needs to look. No, it pains me to do this. Bewear is one of my favorite Pokemon, but just, it's not because of its design. It has to do with just how unnatural everything flows together. And I get it, Stufful and Bewear are based off of plush, so they're not supposed to look like real creatures, but that doesn't mean everything together flows well. The ears look like little cat ears that were stuck onto it. The body is very rounded, so when the tail is on it, it just looks like it's stuck on as well. The colors just cut off in solid sections. Bewear's design just feels very segmented. Although that's not to say everything's terrible. I do like how the paw prints are a darker shade of pink that breaks up the brown a little bit. I also like how its mouth doesn't normally show. It adds to that intimidating nature of Bewear. And the overall roundness of the plush nature, while it doesn't work for certain aspects like the tail, it does lead to a very soft looking shape of the Pokemon. So there's a really good base here. It just needed to be decorated a lot better. The Crown of Thorns Starfish inspiration for Toxapex is such an interesting design, with all of its legs making up a shelter dome. The problem is the little body on the inside, just being so much smaller than its legs, feel proportionately odd. I don't like how it's just hanging there, like the little skin attaching the body to its legs. It's so thin. It's almost like Weedle's spike tail on the back of it. Looks like it could just easily just get snipped off at any second. And also the body being so small compared to the rest of its legs are a little weird, and the teeth all just jagged sticking out of its mouth are also a little off-putting. Whismur suffers from a similar issue to Spinda, where its personality bleeding too much into its design overall hurts it and makes the design just feel kind of gimmicky. And it's mainly in the design of its eyes and its mouth. The worried mouth isn't too bad, but the eyes resembling this overall unaware and anxious emotion makes it difficult to judge Whismur's design without taking into account its personality, which is an important thing to do, but there needs to be a good balance. It's not a terrible problem problem to have, which is why it's not in any lower tiers. And there are some good things about Whismur. I do like how its ears double as earmuffs. And even though I'm not a huge fan of the ears just being holes, it is a good way to signify where this design is going to go with its evolutions. The Easter Island heads are a pretty interesting thing to base a Pokemon off of, and I really like how sturdy Nosepass's design is. With all of the flat parts of the rock, all at these different angles, there's a lot of structure to it. It's just, the nose is so big. It really takes up a lot of attention for this design, which is fine, and obviously it's based on the nose, which is also doubling as its compass, but it's just an Easter Island head with a big nose. At least those eyes are shut. And I know I usually complain about Pokemon with closed eyes because it's hard to really draw a connection to them, and that does definitely hit Nosepass a little bit, although seeing as what it looks like with Probopass with those eyes open, maybe it's for the best. Oh, I know it's Venusaur, I know he's a classic, but he's ugly, he's pretty ugly. One positive thing I will say about Venusaur, it looks powerful. The big flower coming out of the top of it with the leaves spreading over its body. There are some parts of it that could have been designed a little better. Its body is all pimply and it doesn't look very mobile. It's not supposed to, but it looks a little too immobile at times from how big it is. It's got this really wide face with this really big mouth, and the eyes are being stretched so far apart. Just odd to tell what emotion Venusaur is just based on the eyelids placement. They're always slanted inward, and the teeth is so little teeth, but when it closes its mouth, they're always sticking out. The flower part of it's pretty. It's a great centerpiece to its design, but as for its blue body, it's just very unappealing. Woobat's a cute little bat. I like that it's a little cotton ball, basically. Little tooth, it's kind of silly. I will admit the heart-shaped nose works a lot better on Woobat than it does with Swoobat, although it does suffer because now there's no eyes at all. It's being covered up by the fur, which is a cute little thing. I did complain about the eyes before, but similar to Nosepass, when you see its eyes actually open with its next evolution, maybe it's for the best that they were shut. Magmar's body has such a cool design. The black collar-like design separates the red from its feet, and it separates the head from its body a little bit, but it still doesn't look very unnatural. The flame tail is always a good touch. The back is nice and spiky. The arms are probably the coolest part of the design. They're all of these little scales that look like burnt bumps over its arms, adding some cool sharpness to its body, which lead to the sharp claws. But like, why do you think it's in the bad tier? Look at that face! Just look at that face. The weird duck salamander design on the top of a head is odd, to say the least. It's just a weird shape, and it sinks into its eyes, so you have the eyes stuck between the weirdly shaped head and the bill. It is such a awkward face that really hurts the rest of its design, because the body design is awesome. It's a really good body design. The face is where it really drops the ball. Yes, it is not in the worst tier, it's not in the awful tier, and it almost made it out of the bad tier. So why? Why is Aromatisse so high up? Well, it's just straight up not that bad. I honestly think the body is the worst part of the design. It just makes the Pokemon overly round. It doesn't look like it's shaped well into the rest of the Pokemon's design. The head part of it is actually a pretty good design. There's a nice roundedness to the bottom collar of it, and it sticks up just like the ears do, so it's all leading into one direction. Yeah, the eyes stick out a little bit, and they do look like it's staring into your soul, but the eyelashes take away the pressure a little bit. Just that style of the Masquerade or Plague Doctor mask. If you just removed the roundness of the body, and you've just focused a lot more on the upper half of its body, then I believe this design definitely wouldn't be as hated as much. But yeah, that doesn't change the fact that the body design is still the same. Just tweaking it doesn't mean it should be any higher, and that's why it is still in the bad tier. Yes, the form rule strikes hard for Zamazenta. We're going to be talking about its main form, which is considered to be the hero of many battles, and not the one on the box art of Pokemon Shield, the Crowned Shield form. Zamazenta, I feel like, does look better in the Crowned Shield form, because the regular hero of many battles form is... yeah. The red on its body is a very dark color, so the black outlining its face, even though it's not super bad, it does make the face and black lines blend in just a little bit, so the face doesn't stick out as much. And also the blue fur, very tip of its head, just looks like it's kind of hanging there. I get it, it's not the form everyone remembers Zamazenta for. It's supposed to not be as impressive as the Crowned Shield form. Even though it's supposed to look messy, it's not really appealing, and it's just overall pretty boring. Amistar is a pretty cool designed cephalopod. I really like the tentacles all sticking out of it. We all know that the shell growing too big is the reason Amistar went extinct, but it feels like everything on its face is getting a little too big, which is why it's in the bad tier. The shell's a really cool design. It doesn't look too big for its body, but the eyes are just bulging out and the teeth are just sticking out. Like, everything about it is just way too much in your face, and I don't know if that's because the shell is like weighing the body down so much that it's pushing its teeth and eyes out. It's just too much. Rounding out the bad tier, we have Raikou. Now, what puts Raikou at the top of the bad tier and not anywhere higher is because while yes, it still does bring across that power, the purple mane and the tail really hurt this design. Now, the purple mane is supposed to resemble a dark rain cloud, which is a really good idea. It's an electric type. As for the tail, it's supposed to look like a lightning bolt. However, in order to try and get the tail to be seen, they made the purple mane so short. It looks like this tiny little cape. So why not just make the mane longer and have the tail sticking out of the mane and make the tail a little thicker? It looks so puny, just like a little spark of lightning. There's a lot of cool stuff, a lot of memorable stuff going on here. It's just those two little things that really hurt it from being one of the best Pokemon designs. Okay, and there you have it. There's the bad tier. I know there's a couple controversial choices in there, but what's really cool is that the discussion is now going to shift from, oh, I can't believe this Pokemon was put so low, to, oh, I can't believe this Pokemon was put so high up. We already saw that here with like Aromatisse and Barbaracle, so it's going to be very interesting to have that discussion shift on your own personal Pokemon placements. Please, guys, let me know how you feel about some of these Pokemon. I'd love to get some more appreciation for these ones that were rated lower than you think they were, or if some are rated higher than you think they should as well. Let me know, let's get a discussion going, but of course, please, if you're going to do that, let's keep it civil. We're just having fun here. One thing I want to mention that's starting with this tier and is going to continue with future tiers is that the tier list maker I used to put this list together didn't have art for all of the Pokemon. So because of that, I had to use some other Pokemon to stand in for the Pokemon I talked about. So for this tier in particular, Regidrago is being represented by Mega Mawile, and Raticate is being represented by Alolan Raticate. So yeah, now that we got the bad tier out of the way, let's get the other two tiers up there, the awful tier and the worst tier, and just look at that. We're finally making a little bit of a dent in the Pokedex. So even though we do have a bit of a ways to go, it feels good to know that we're finally making some progress here. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit just for channel updates and just some fun stuff. So if you don't want to hear all that, the video is over. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you. But if you want to stick and hang out for a little bit longer, have a little chat about the channel and what's going to be the deal with this list going forward and other content. I know it's been a really long time since we last spoke about the Pokemon tier list. The awful tier was a little over a year ago when I released that video. For those of you who are still watching it, thank you so much. That means so much to me. And now a big question and a problem that I knew I would face one day while making this list is that New Pokemon are always coming out, and not only have we gotten new Pokemon in Legends Arceus, but Generation 9 is coming out. Scarlet and Violet's releasing with probably close to 100 new Pokemon, so what does that mean for the tier list? Well, I've always planned when I finished every tier to add the rest of the Generation 8 Pokemon. Because this list is numbered, you can't slip in the Legends Arceus Pokemon. I'd love for all of Gen 8 to just be covered. Generation 9 won't be talked about, even when all this video is done. Maybe in the future, I'll give my opinions on them. In fact, I'd love to. But when I was first making this list back in 2020, Sword and Shield was still pretty new. And even with revisions, I still feel with Scarlet and Violet coming out, that I don't have super concrete opinions on a lot of the Galar Pokemon. I have a pretty decent opinion on each of them, but, you know, it still takes a while for you to, or at least me, to really get used to them. So with all the Paldean Pokemon coming out now with Scarlet and Violet, even if this list is finished in like 2 or 3 years, I still feel like that point would be when I finally could have a solid opinion on all those Generation 9 Pokemon. So I really do apologize that the list couldn't be as current as possible, but for those of you who are sticking around, I know I've said it a bunch, but seriously guys, thank you so much. I have no idea when the OK tier would come out. That's our next tier. That's the biggest tier of this list, easily. It's almost double the size of the bad tier. It's gigantic. I just can't promise when it would come out at this point, unfortunately, and I really do apologize for the inconvenience with that. However, I also understand that that shouldn't halt the rest of my content on this channel, because ever since the Nicktoons video, we've hit over 200 subscribers, guys. Thank you so much. Like, thank you. I remember in the last Pokemon tier video, the awful tier, I was talking about how excited I was for 10 subscribers, and now 200? Like, guys, thank you so much. For all the subscribers that the Nicktoons video brought in, I don't want to leave you guys hanging. The Nicktoons video now is almost a year old, which is crazy. So up next, we're going to be doing a Nickelodeon video. It's not going to be like a crossover type of video. It's going to be a review of one of my childhood Nickelodeon games. So I hope you guys look forward to that. But I don't want to leave you guys hanging with the thoughts about Legends Arceus Pokemon. I wanted to give you guys a little treat for waiting so long. So this isn't like an official placement on the list. I just want to quickly go over all the new Pokemon that were introduced in Legends Arceus, and since they're not going to be featured in the tier list, although they are still Generation 8 Pokemon, and just give my opinion, and if I had to place them in the tier list right now, what tier would they end up in? I realized I was saying Legends Arceus Pokemon this whole time when it's a region that's Hisuian Pokemon, so. Alright, first up we got Weirdeer. Weirdeer is a huge improvement on Stantler. I know I wasn't a big fan of Stantler in the awful tier, but Weirdeer is an improvement. I've heard a lot of people say that it looks a lot more like a regional variant rather than an actual evolution to Stantler. And I could totally see that. I do like that it leaned into the more winter theming. I remember actually mentioning that when I was talking about Stantler. It doesn't do a whole lot to improve, but it definitely covers up a lot of its more awkward areas, especially with the fur, the big beard it has. I would definitely put this in the good tier. Cleaver is definitely my favorite Pokemon of the Hisuian decks. It's just awesome. It's crazy though, because I still think it's my least favorite out of Scyther and Scizor, but it still is just a fantastic Pokemon. I guess this is a bit of a spoiler for where those two are going to end up, but they're such great designs. I can't put them low at all. But Cleaver's really cool. I love the whole rock concept. The only thing that kind of I don't like is that the actual axes that it uses, the cleavers, don't look like they have a lot of detail on it, especially on the in-game model. It looks like it's just pieces of paper, but everything else is really cool about it. This would be in the great tier, I'd say. Unfortunately, I'm not a huge fan of the rest of these Pokemon. It's funny, because when this list was coming out, Ursaring's entry was gonna have me talking about how I think an evolution would really improve this Pokemon, how it really should use an evolution. And Ursaluna kind of does and doesn't accomplish that at the same time. It's a little ugly. It's a little ugly. It's mostly in the face. At first, the bulkiness of its body was a little off-putting, but I've gotten used to it. I just don't like all the mud on its face. I think that's mud, and it just looks sad all the time. I don't like that. I'm really not a huge fan about that. I've definitely warmed up to it a little bit. I really didn't like it at first. It just looked so, like, messy. But I've gotten used to the bulkiness of it and the mud incorporated into its design, like its fur having the gray mud on it, like on its face, isn't horrible. But I still think I'd put it in the bad tier. Basculegion, it's okay. It looks like a parade float, and it's just like a big Basculin. I do appreciate the design of its tail, how it looks like it's like more artistically woven into its design rather than just a fin. That's really cool. I do like that a lot. And it really incorporates the ghost typing into its design really well. But the boxiness is weird. I think I might actually put this in the bad tier as well. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. A higher bad tier. Oh, I don't like this one at all. Sneasel, I really don't like. Sneasel, especially Hisuian Sneasel, is a really good design. Although Sneasel, I think, still has a little bit of some issues. Although, oh my goodness, it's so much better than this. I don't like how its face is just like kind of, it's so small on its head. I don't like that at all. The big claws are cool. I like that. That's really cool. Everything else, it looks way too like, the proportions are way too long, and like it has long arms, long legs, long body. Maybe I just have to get used to seeing Sneasel in like a bigger proportioned body. But as for right now, I really don't like this. I really don't like this. I think this would be in the worst tier. I really don't like this design. Overquill, I want to like Overquill, and luckily it's really growing on me. Overquill's grown on me a lot. I love its name. I try not to have names be incorporated into the placement of the video because they're different for every region. But I love the name Overquill. It's so funny. It's so funny, and it has to do a lot with this design. It's just so big and spiky. It's so spiky. It's funny. I'm happy Quillfish got an evolution, dude. I'm so happy Quillfish got an evolution. It needed it. It really did. It's just funny looking. It's too much. It is too much. Part of me thinks it would end up in the bad tier, but I want to put it in the okay tier. I have Enamorus. I need to warm up to this one. I don't like it right now. I do like that the Kami trio from Unova finally has a different looking one, because Landorus, Thundurus, and Tornadus all look so similar. They really do. In fact, spoiler, but I'm pretty sure where they're placed in the tier list, they're basically all next to each other, because they're like the same design. So Enamorus at least adds a really good amount of differentiation. I love the snake scarf. That's smart. I like that a lot. But everything else, it's like a little. I'm not gonna warm up to this. I'm so used to how the Kami trio looks. So even though this is different, I have to get used to this type of design. Like, it's the love-hate Pokemon, so like combining love with like also like hate, I guess. Like it looks a little like menacing a little bit, so like that kind of throws me off, the menacingness of its design. I guess that's probably not the right word, combined with the love. So it's really throwing me off, this design. I'm not a huge fan of it. Maybe awful tier. I think the okay tier. No, bad. I'll put it, I think the bad tier. I think it'd end up there. Yeah, okay. But we've come to the end of the video. Thank you guys for sticking around if you chose to stick around after the list. I really appreciate you guys sitting and just basically listening to me ramble. I'll see you guys soon with another video. I already have my next one planned. I'm excited to get back into it. Again, it's going to be a Nicktoons themed video, so for all the Nickelodeon fans who've been waiting, can't wait to talk about some more Nicktoons with you guys. And for all you Pokemon fans, enjoy Scarlet and Violet if you're gonna get it. It looks awesome. I'm gonna get Scarlet version. If you want, see me make some other non-list related videos, let me know. I'd love to put something together for you guys. But for all the Pokemon tier list viewers, thank you all so much again for your patience and giving me your time to just talk about Pokemon a little bit. Thank you all so much. And when we open up the Brand Slam Pokedex again, I guess that's what we'll call it, I can't wait to talk about the OK tier with you guys. So until then, and to everyone watching, I'll see you guys soon.